Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and, I gotta say, pretty provocative argument about complexity. We're going on a journey to ask, what is the true source of the most intricate, information-packed structures we see in the universe?
So let me start by asking you a question. Is a snowflake as complex as a sentence? I mean, they both look incredibly detailed, right? But as we're about to see, they might actually represent two completely different kinds of complexity. And that brings us to our first big idea. You see, not all complexity is created equal. To really get to the heart of this argument, we have to pull these two types apart and see what makes them tick. Let's break this down. On one hand, you've got what we can call an intricate pattern. Think of a snowflake or a crystal. It's beautiful for sure, but it forms because of simple, repeating physical laws. But on the other hand, you have something called specified complexity. This is different. This is a unique, information-heavy arrangement that does a specific job, like a line of computer code or a sentence. The whole argument we're exploring today hangs on this question. Do these two things come from the same place? So let's put a formal definition on that. Specified complexity describes something that is one, super improbable, and two, it perfectly matches a specific functional pattern. The argument we're examining today proposes that when you find these two things together, it's a strong sign of intelligent agency, not just random chance or the laws of physics doing their thing.
All right, so just how hard is it to get this kind of functional, specified complexity by accident? Well, the numbers? They're absolutely staggering. To really get a feel for the scale of the problem, let's take a quick dip into biology. Imagine a pretty small, functional protein. Let's say it's made of just 100 amino acids. Now, there are 20 different kinds of amino acids to choose from for each spot. So how many different combinations are even possible? The answer is just mind-blowing. The odds of randomly hitting the right sequence for just one functional protein of this size are about 1 in 10 to the 130th power. To give you some perspective, scientists estimate there are only about 10 to the 80th atoms in the entire known universe. The odds are so small, they're basically zero. And this brings up a closely related idea called irreducible complexity. The classic example here is the bacterial flagellum. It's like a tiny outboard motor for a cell. The argument is that this motor needs every single one of its parts to work. Take one piece away, and the whole thing just stops. Proponents of this idea argue that you can't build something like this through small, gradual steps, because none of the intermediate versions would work. It's an all-or-nothing kind of problem. Okay, let's pivot. We're going to switch gears from biology to the human mind itself, because a really famous set of experiments in neuroscience gives us a totally different angle on where control and agency might come from. We're talking about the Libet experiments, and what they found was wild. Your brain starts getting ready to perform an action. They call this the readiness potential, a full half second before you're even consciously aware that you've decided to act. But, and this is the crucial part, they also discovered there's a tiny window of about 150 milliseconds, right before the action, where your conscious mind can jump in and say, nope, never mind. It can veto the whole thing. This, of course, leads to a massive question. If your brain is already in motion before you are, is your feeling of free will just a story you tell yourself after the fact? Are we all just passengers watching our brains drive the car for us? And this sets up the two big competing ideas. The deterministic view says, yeah, pretty much. The mind just emerges from the brain's physical processes, so that conscious no is just another brain signal. But the other view, the non-emergent or libertarian view, says, wait a minute, maybe the mind is something distinct, and that no is a genuine act of will, consciousness reaching down and actually changing the physical outcome. This is where the argument we're exploring today takes a really interesting leap. Because to understand what that veto really means, we have to look past the brain's wiring and think about the nature of the decision being made. The real power of that veto isn't just that it happens, but why it happens. It's almost never just a random cancellation. More often than not, it's the result of you weighing an immediate impulse against some kind of abstract long-term goal. And this is what we're going to define as agency for this discussion. It's the ability to choose a future you want over an impulse you're feeling right now. It's choosing to act based on an abstract value, like your health, your prosperity, or your honor, over a simple, immediate desire. This leads to a fascinating idea, that there are two different kinds of causation.
You have the material realm, which is governed by physics. It's pushed from the past by prior events, cause and effect. But then you have this proposed immaterial realm of the mind, and it's not pushed from the past. It's pulled toward the future by abstract goals, by purpose, by meaning.
So when the mind says no, it's not just some random physical event. It's a determination. It's a choice made by a higher level system that's operating on abstract values to decide the best path forward. And now we're going to bring it all home. The argument takes this whole idea of agency, this pull from the future that we just explored in our own minds, and it applies it to the biggest question of them all, the origin of life.
The final claim, the big conclusion of this whole line of reasoning is this. The digital code written in our DNA is the ultimate example of specified complexity. It's not just a pattern, it's a functional blueprint. It's information. So let's just run it through the checklist we've built. First, is DNA highly complex? Absolutely. It's a massive, non-repeating sequence. Second, is it specified? Yes, it's a literal blueprint for building a self-replicating organism. Third, is it astronomically improbable to get by chance? Well, as we saw with proteins, the numbers suggest it is. And finally, does the system seem optimized for an abstract, long-term goal? The argument here is yes. That goal is survival and replication.
So we end up right back where we started, with a really big question. If this special kind of complexity, specified complexity, is a reliable marker for agency, and if life itself is the prime example of it, that leads us to a final, profound thought. If life is an artifact, what does that imply about its origin? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this one.